Level 989.
Welcome to a 989 on Health Extra. These quick supplements should help ease any withdrawal symptoms you may experience while waiting for our next full episode. So, Mike, what's on today's agenda?
Today I'm going to do an off-the-cuff chat about a quick topic. Now, as I ramble on, you're going to wonder what the connection to health is, and I promise it's coming. My sister and I enjoy talking about the possibilities of living in a tiny house, possibly even living off the grid. It's kind of fun to think about, especially if you could be self-employed or could work remotely. You could spend your time working on projects that directly benefit yourself or your household, not work for some random company that gives you money that's already spent for things like housing and food. I can't recall when I first heard the term living off the grid. It was probably sometime in the 1980s when I heard about these crazy people who'd move out into the middle of nowhere into a trailer or some sort of small cottage and intentionally cut themselves off from the grid of electricity, running water, in an attempt to live a simpler life. I mean, whoa, no cable TV, no MTV? Bogus, dude! The internet wasn't a thing yet in the 80s, but I think it would be harder to give up the internet than it would be to give up cable TV. From the perspective of our modern era, with the rise in popularity of tiny houses and ever more efficient solar panels, living off the grid seems more doable than ever. Of course, just like with a religion or being a vegetarian, there are many levels and degrees to tiny house and off the grid. If you need solar panels, it's not a one-time purchase and done. You're in the solar panel club now, my friend. They need cleaned, maintained, repaired, replaced, and you can't always do all of this yourself. You're still tied into the global market for tools, equipment, parts, batteries, and recycling. So if you're hoping to live off the grid for impact to the environment reasons, you might not be helping as much as you think. Similar for wind power. It's a huge industry, and keeping your wind power generator working efficiently obliges you to join the wind power generator club. You might not even be able to install a wind power generator yourself. Some heavy lifting equipment might be needed. So you bought a picturesque plot of land on the side of some mountain somewhere. That's great. Good luck getting a crew with a crane to come out there and help you install your wind turbine. And you might need regular visits from a crew to properly maintain your wind turbine as well. If you really want to live off the grid, you should consider whether or not you want to use electricity at all. Humans somehow managed for hundreds of thousands of years without electricity. It might make more sense to have solar-powered devices with their own little panels built in. Lanterns, weather radios, fans, and so on. And also the more passive solar devices, such as a big black tank to heat water. In imagining trying to live without electricity, I'm kind of baffled at what I would do all day. I mean, nowadays, most of my working and free time is spent on a computing device, be it my phone or my PC, and doing things online, from spreadsheet data entry at work, to making a podcast episode, to taking online college classes, to watching streaming video from Netflix. I guess I would read more books, spend more time writing my novel, longhand obviously. The bulk of my time would have to be spent tending my goats and chickens, working my tiny farm, canning food, cleaning, repairing my tiny house. Doesn't really sound like a stressful way to live if you have the skills needed. No matter how skilled you are, there's always going to be things you need that you can't make yourself. So you're going to need some form of income. And of course, there will be taxes on your plot of land. At the very least, you'll probably need some money to pay Uncle Sam. But your daily life would most likely be more peaceful, right? You'd probably bond with your nearby, off-the-grid neighbors too, even if nearby means 5 miles away. One of the websites I enjoy visiting is called Reddit. Basically, random people post links to content they find interesting, and other random people vote on and comment on that content. It's really the discussions in the comment sections that are most interesting to me. There's so many smart people out there. So on Reddit the other day, I came across a post showing a dog trying to escape from a boa constrictor. One of those giant snakes. And a group of kids were trying to help the dog. They're throwing rocks at it and poking it with sticks, and they eventually succeed. The dog runs off, apparently unharmed. I'll put a link to this post in the show notes. A few of the comments for the boa constrictor dog post talked about how these kids, probably not citizens of some big city, took direct action to save the dog, when typical city folk would probably call for help instead. One commenter, named Flatus Giganticus, had this to say, quote, "There are two very distinct populations in that respect. The urbanites and suburbanites call the authorities. They have been conditioned from birth to defer and rely on government authority for most things. Considering population density and availability of government services, this makes sense in a lot of ways. Country folk tend to take care of things themselves or with the help of their neighbors. They tend to be more self-reliant. Given the sparse population and the dearth of basic government services, this too makes sense. A simple example from my life. We had a hurricane come through 20 or so years ago while I lived in town. We reported downed trees and power outages and called emergency services for flood-related safety issues and waited inside our houses for the city to come resolve the problem. I've since moved back to the country. A few years ago, we had another hurricane come through. The power was out, roads were washed out and flooded, trees were blocking travel all over the place. At first light, you could hear the chainsaws and tractors as people started to clear the roads and help their neighbors. Another neighbor on the other side of the washed-out road took orders for a run to town for food and any emergency supplies. He then hand-delivered the supplies. Lifted trucks started ferrying people across swollen creek crossings and through muddy, temporary roads across fields. All things considered, I'd rather live in the country." End quote. That really helps me put things into perspective. I'm a born and bred city person, and there would be so many lessons for me to learn if I moved into the country and off the grid, such as the very real need to become more proactive in helping my neighbors and asking for help. I think the asking for help part would be harder than anything else. I hate asking for help. Granted, being more proactive in my community isn't something I need to move into the country to take to heart. I live in an apartment complex with probably 500 people in it. I don't know any of them. But there are 500 of them. If the guy across the hall needs a cup of sugar, that's fine. I do not have 500 cups of sugar. When you have 5 neighbors, not 500, it's probably easier to volunteer for things. None of this weak justification excuses my lack of interaction or helpfulness, but it's a factor. So, moving to the country would involve a recalibration of many things, including the reliance on rescue services. If you lop off your hand with an axe or break a leg or have a heart attack, an ambulance is not just 8 minutes away. Depending on where you live and the weather conditions, they might have to send a chopper for you. And you thought ambulances were expensive. You and anyone living with you off the grid will need a much better understanding of first aid than you probably have now. And you'll need a bigger, more robust first aid kit. In your off-the-grid utopia, you also have to think about rehabilitation. Something as simple as a broken leg can result in the loss of a lot of muscle mass during the 6 to 8 weeks it takes for a leg to heal. Making long trips into town to see the physical therapist twice a week becomes a lot more difficult off the grid. Maybe you'll live in some sort of tiny house trailer. The steps leading up into the trailer, those are going to be tricky on crutches. If you need to use a ladder or some steep stairs to reach your cozy sleeping loft, how are you going to manage that with a broken leg? Clearly, you shouldn't even try. The idea that you might someday have even temporary mobility issues is something that you should keep in mind while choosing the design and layout of your tiny home. In many ways, living off the grid seems like a better idea for the young and a healthy sort of person. But as you approach retirement age, it will likely be difficult to transition back into the world of apartments or mortgages if you haven't had an official mortgage or rental history for the past 10 years or more. One thing I came across is a problem in places like New York City, where micro apartments of as little as 250 square feet are claimed to have potential health risks and crowding challenges, increasing the risks of domestic violence and substance abuse. And the average tiny house varies, but many tiny houses are 250 square feet. So what is considered an unhealthily small living space in a city is considered a welcome break from oversized life if you park a small trailer by a lake. Does access to the outdoors make such a difference? Surely if you were to properly use the amenities of a large city, it would balance out. It's not just your apartment, you have the whole city. It's not just your trailer, you have the whole forest. Also, I just used the word unhealthily. Did I pull it off? Unhealthily. I totally think I pulled it off. It's a real word now. Living off the grid will also mean you need to find a reliable source of clean, fresh water. And since you'll be dealing with your own sewage, a big part of the clean water work becomes making sure that the sewage and the potable water never have a chance to meet. It's like a hilarious sitcom situation, but in this scene, if these two things meet, you aren't laughing, you're dead. Speaking of water, many tiny homes are not as well ventilated as a typical house or apartment, so moisture becomes a problem. Each adult human sweats or breathes out around 1 liter or a quarter of a gallon of water every day. And this can build up in your tiny home, creating a very real danger of mold. There can also be increased stress living off the grid, especially if you're living a nomadic lifestyle. Maybe you move your trailer from place to place. Your body will automatically go into a heightened alert mode in a new location, and it can be hard to properly sleep or relax. It depends on the person, of course. There's plenty of folks who don't even sleep well in a place as secure as a nice hotel. They wake up freaking out because they don't know where they are. I don't personally have that problem, probably because my level of concern is abnormally low. I should probably get that checked. But out in the country somewhere where a bear could smash through the wall, it might even happen to someone like me. Increased sun exposure will definitely be something to consider living off the grid. You're almost certainly choosing this new lifestyle not so you can binge streaming video all day. You're doing it to be out in nature. So you're going to have to plan for long sleeves and hats and sunblock. Skin cancer is the most common form of cancer in the United States. In 2011 alone, there were more than 65,000 cases of skin cancer, and these were not tiny home dwellers. They were probably couch potatoes. There are many more concerns, each of which I could go on about for quite a while. But the stresses of loneliness, noise pollution, especially from generators. And speaking of generators, let's talk about diesel fumes and diesel exhaust. Not fun. Exposure to extremes of heat and cold, posture problems if your trailer, your van doesn't allow you to stand up fully, and the list goes on. From the moment my wife and I started watching tiny house shows on TV, probably 10 years ago now, I've said the same thing. I like the tiny house style. It's almost like a ship in how everything is so well thought out, everything has a place, everything is clever, space is not wasted, storage spaces are tucked away everywhere. And all of this can be accomplished in a very dapper and sleek way. So that's really my approach to tiny houses. I'm going to collect a scrapbook of all the best ideas from tiny houses and put all of that into a design of a typical house. Will we ever get to design and build our own house? That's very unlikely, but it's fun to think about. As interesting as tiny home living seems, it's also important to really do your research and know what you're about to do for your mental and physical health. As always, there are lots of useful links in the show notes. Be sure to check these out for more details. Thanks again to our great listeners for sending in suggestions. If you'd like to send in your own topic for consideration, head on over to level989.com/contact and make it so.
That's all for now. You can find links to read more about today's topics at level989.com. Why not take a moment to rate or review us in iTunes, or give us a mention on social media? We can't help everyone if they don't know we exist. Don't rely on us as an alternative to medical advice from a professional healthcare provider. For the full disclaimer, please see our website. Thanks for listening, and now, go health yourself.